Welcome to the English Pod community. I'm Natasha, your host. If you want to improve your English listening and writing skills, this episode is for you. Today, I will share real-life stories and experiences to help you understand English in everyday situations. Listening to real conversations helps you learn natural expressions, and writing about them improves your memory and vocabulary. If you're new here, we upload videos daily to help you learn English. So, let's get started. Have you ever faced a difficult decision and had to choose between two options? What did you do? How did you make the right choice? Let me tell you a story about my friend Daniel. A few years ago, Daniel had a stable job in his hometown. He worked as a manager in a small company, and life was comfortable. However, one day, he received an unexpected offer, an opportunity to work for a bigger company in another city. The new job paid more, but it meant leaving his family, friends, and everything familiar. Daniel spent days thinking about what to do. He made a list of pros and cons. Staying in his hometown meant security, but moving meant growth and a better future. He talked to his wife, Emma, and they discussed everything carefully. She supported him no matter what, but she reminded him to think about what truly mattered to him. One evening, Daniel met his old school teacher, Mr. Smith, who gave him some advice. He said, "Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the best experiences. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone." These words stayed with Daniel, and after thinking long and hard, he decided to take the job. At first, life in the new city was challenging. The work was more demanding, and he missed his family. But over time, he adapted. He met new people, improved his skills, and after a few years, he got an even better position. Looking back, he realized that taking that step was the best decision he had ever made. Let me share another personal story. A few years ago, I had to move to a new city for work. I had been living in the same place for a long time, surrounded by friends and family. But the job I wanted was in a different city, and I had to make a decision. Stay or move? At first, I was excited about the new opportunity. It was a great job, and the company was offering me a chance to grow. But then I started to feel nervous. I had never lived far from my family before, and I wasn't sure how I would adjust to life in a new place. The thought of starting over was both exciting and scary. I decided to take the leap. The first few months were difficult. I missed my friends, and everything felt unfamiliar. I remember one day, I was at the grocery store, and I couldn't even find the bread section. It felt so strange. But slowly things started to get better. I made new friends, found my favorite cafes, and became comfortable in my new job. Looking back, I'm really glad I made that choice. It wasn't easy, but it taught me so much about myself and how strong I can be in challenging situations. Now, I'm more confident about making big decisions because I've learned that sometimes you have to take risks to grow. What about you? Have you ever moved to a new city or started something completely new? How did you feel in the beginning? Do you think it was worth it in the end? If you're still not sure about making a big decision, that's okay. It's normal to feel unsure sometimes. But remember, sometimes the biggest opportunities come from taking chances. It's all part. That reminds me of another story. One that really changed the way I think about challenges and new experiences. This is about my cousin, Michael. Michael had always been passionate about cooking. Ever since he was a child, he loved watching his mother prepare meals in the kitchen. He would stand beside her, asking questions about ingredients, spices, and different cooking techniques. By the time he was a teenager, he could cook better than most adults. Everyone in the family admired his talent, but for Michael, cooking was more than just a hobby. It was a dream. As he grew older, he dreamed of becoming a professional chef. However, there was one big problem. His father wanted him to follow a different career path. His father, Mr. Johnson, was a businessman. He believed that a real career meant working in an office, wearing a suit, and having a stable salary. Every time Michael mentioned becoming a chef, his father would shake his head and say, "Cooking is fine for home, but it's not a serious career. You should study business and take over the family company." Michael felt torn between his passion and his father's expectations. He respected his father, but he couldn't imagine spending his life doing something he didn't love. His mother, on the other hand, supported his dreams. She told him, "You only have one life, Michael. If cooking makes you happy, you should go for it." One day, an opportunity came that changed everything. A famous culinary school in another city was holding a cooking competition. The winner would receive a full scholarship to study at the school. It was a golden opportunity, but there was a catch. Michael had never competed in a professional setting before. He doubted himself. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he disappointed his father? Despite his fears, Michael decided to enter the competition. He spent weeks practicing, perfecting his dishes, and learning new techniques. He woke up early and stayed up late, determined to give his best effort. When the competition day arrived, he was extremely nervous. As he stepped into the kitchen, he saw other competitors, some with years of experience. His hands trembled as he began preparing his dish. The judges watched closely as he worked. They tasted every dish carefully, discussing the flavors and presentation. After what felt like hours, the results were announced. Michael held his breath. When they called his name as the winner, he couldn't believe it. He had won. That evening, he called his father to tell him the news. There was silence on the phone. Then, to Michael's surprise, his father said, "I may not have understood your passion before, but I see now that you are truly talented. If this is what you want, I support you." Michael packed his bags and moved to the new city to start culinary school. It wasn't easy. He had to work hard, adapt to a new environment, and face many challenges. But in the end, it was all worth it. Today, Michael is a professional chef running his own restaurant. And guess who visits his restaurant often? His father, who is now his biggest supporter. This story teaches an important lesson. Sometimes we have to believe in ourselves even when others don't. Taking risks is scary, but if we don't follow our passions, we might regret it later. So, let me ask you, have you ever wanted to do something but felt afraid to take the first step? Maybe you wanted to learn a new skill, start a new job, or move to a different place. What is stopping you? Is it fear, uncertainty, or the opinions of others? I want to share another story now, one that's a bit different but equally powerful. It's about my friend Jack. Jack and I met during a language exchange program when we were both in college. At the time, Jack was studying law and I was studying business. Jack was a very quiet person. He didn't speak much in class or during our breaks, and when we first started talking, I realized that his English wasn't as strong as some of the others in the group. However, despite his quiet nature, Jack had big dreams. He wanted to work for a large international law firm, but there was one problem. His English was holding him back. His law courses were in English, and he found it difficult to understand some of the legal terms and complex texts. Even though he was brilliant at the law itself, the language barrier kept him from fully expressing himself. One day, during a conversation, Jack told me about his dream. "I want to work in a top law firm, Natasha," he said, "but I feel like my English will never be good enough for that. I don't know if I can do it." I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, and I knew how much he wanted to succeed. It reminded me of the time when I had doubts about moving to a new city. I said to him, "Jack, you've already taken the hardest step. You're in this program, you're improving every day, and most importantly, you believe in your dream. That's what will carry you through." Jack smiled but still looked unsure. "But Natasha, I don't feel confident when I have to speak in front of people or explain complicated things in English. What if I make a mistake? What if they don't understand me?" His words made me think. I knew that feeling of fear all too well. The fear of making mistakes in a language you're still learning. But I also knew that mistakes are a part of learning, and it's how we grow. I told him, Jack, every mistake you make is one step closer to where you want to be. Don't worry about being perfect. Just focus on improving a little bit every day. You'll get there. So, Jack took my advice to heart. Every morning he spent extra time reviewing legal terms and practicing his English. He even started watching English TV shows related to law, trying to pick up vocabulary and phrases that could help him in his studies. Slowly, Jack began to feel more confident. 1 year later, Jack had graduated and was ready to apply for jobs at law firms. He had built up his confidence, and his English had improved significantly. He got an internship at a well-known international firm, and just a few months after that, he was offered a full-time position. I was so proud of him when he told me the news. But more than that, I was proud of how far he had come. Jack had faced his fears, worked hard, and never gave up on his dream. And today, he's working in the firm he always wanted to be in. When Jack shared his success story with me, he said, I never thought I could make it. I thought my English would always be a problem. But I learned that if you keep pushing yourself, you can achieve anything. This story shows us that even when we feel like we're not good enough or that our dreams are too big, persistence and hard work can make all the difference. Jack didn't let his fear stop him. Instead, he faced it head-on, and now he's living his dream. Now, I want to ask you, what is one goal you've set for yourself that feels a little out of reach right now? Is it learning English, starting a new job, or even traveling to a new country? What's stopping you from going after it? Often, the biggest obstacle we face is our own fear. We fear making mistakes, fear not being good enough, or fear what others might think of us. But remember, we all start somewhere, and no one gets things perfect from the beginning. The important thing is to keep going, one step at a time. So, think about this. What small action can you take today that will bring you closer to your goal? Maybe it's learning a new word in English, speaking to someone in English, or even just writing down your dreams. Whatever it is, start today. And know that with each step, you are getting closer to achieving what you've set out to do. When we step outside of our comfort zones, we learn, grow, and discover things about ourselves we never knew before. Jack didn't let his fears define him, and neither should you. Whatever your dream is, you have everything it takes to achieve it. It all starts with believing in yourself and taking that first step. Have you ever faced a challenge that seemed impossible to overcome? How did you deal with it? What did you learn from the experience? And most importantly, are you ready to take that? Let me tell you another story, one that involves a very close friend of mine, Laura. Laura and I have known each other for years, and we've shared a lot of experiences together. But there's one story that really stands out because it taught me a valuable lesson about persistence and believing in yourself. Laura had always dreamed of becoming a photographer. Since she was a little girl, she would take photos of everything: her family, nature, friends, and even her pets. Her passion for photography was obvious to anyone who met her. However, there was a problem. Laura's parents were very traditional. They believed in stable, secure jobs like being a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. When Laura told them she wanted to pursue a career in photography, they were not supportive. They told her it wasn't a real job, and that she needed to focus on her studies and find a more practical career. At first, Laura tried to convince them by showing them the work of famous photographers and explaining how photography could be a career, but nothing seemed to change their minds. They still didn't understand why she wanted to follow her passion for photography instead of taking a more traditional path. For a while, Laura started to doubt herself. She questioned whether her dream of becoming a photographer was worth fighting for. She thought about following a more conventional career path just to make her parents happy. But deep down, she knew she couldn't ignore her passion. One day, while we were sitting at a cafe, Laura opened up to me. She said, "Natasha, I really want to be a photographer, but I feel so lost. I know my parents won't support me, and I don't know if I'm good enough. What if I fail? What if I waste my time?" I could see the sadness in her eyes, but I also saw her determination. I said to her, "Laura, you can't live your life based on what other people think. You have to follow what makes you happy. And remember, every successful photographer had to face challenges. It's part of the journey. If you believe in yourself and keep working hard, you'll get there." Laura smiled, but I could tell she was still unsure. However, she decided to take a chance. She enrolled in a photography course and started building her portfolio. At first, things didn't go smoothly. She struggled with some of the techniques and felt like her photos weren't as good as she wanted them to be. But instead of giving up, Laura kept practicing every day. She took photos in different lighting conditions, experimented with different subjects, and spent hours editing her pictures to make them perfect. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments when Laura felt frustrated, but she kept pushing herself. She started sharing her work online, and slowly but surely, people began to notice. She started receiving positive feedback, and before long, she was invited to showcase her photography at a local art gallery. The day of the exhibition was one of the happiest moments of Laura's life. She had worked so hard to get there, and seeing her work displayed in a gallery was a dream come true. Her parents, who had been skeptical at first, attended the exhibition. When they saw how many people admired Laura's photos, they finally understood what she had been telling them all along. That moment was a turning point for Laura. She realized that success didn't come overnight, but with persistence, hard work, and a belief in herself, she could achieve anything. Today, Laura is a professional photographer with clients from all over the world. She has even started her own photography business. Her parents, who once doubted her, are now her biggest supporters. When I think back to that time when Laura was uncertain about her future, I am so proud of how far she's come. She didn't let anyone else's opinions stop her from following her passion. Instead, she believed in herself and kept going, even when things got tough. And that's something we can all learn from. What about you? Is there something you've always wanted to do, but you've been too afraid to try? Maybe it's learning a new language, pursuing a dream career, or even starting a new hobby. Sometimes the fear of failure or the opinions of others can hold us back. But what if, instead of letting those fears stop us, we embrace them as part of the journey? Let's think about it. How many times have you faced a challenge and thought you couldn't do it? How many times did you doubt yourself or think you weren't good enough? But then, when you pushed through, you realized you were stronger and more capable than you ever thought? Laura's story is a reminder that we all have the ability to follow our dreams, no matter how big or small they may be. The road may not always be easy, and there will be obstacles along the way. But if you're willing to put in the work and keep going, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. Sometimes the hardest part is taking that first step, but once you do, everything else falls into place. Whether it's learning English, pursuing a career, or following a passion, the key is to never give up. Keep pushing forward, even when things get tough, because, like Laura, you might just surprise yourself with what you can achieve. So, I want to ask you, what is something you've been holding back on because of fear or doubt? What is one thing you could start doing today to move closer to your dream? Maybe it's just taking the first small step, like signing up for a class or making a plan. Whatever it is, take that step today and keep believing in yourself. I'm really glad you're enjoying these stories, and I want to keep going. There's one more story I want to share. It's about a man named Tom, And his story is a perfect example of how unexpected opportunities can come when we least expect them, and how they can change our lives completely. Tom and I met at a cafe about 5 years ago. He was a regular customer at the coffee shop where I used to go, and we often exchanged small talk when I would see him there. Tom was an average guy, working in a corporate job as a data analyst. He didn't have any particular goals or passions outside of work, and he often seemed pretty stressed. From the outside, he looked like just another person caught up in the routine of life. One day, I overheard a conversation at the cafe. Tom was talking to a friend about how much he hated his job. He mentioned that he felt stuck and didn't see any room for growth. It was the same thing every day, just numbers and reports, and it was starting to feel like he was losing himself. Tom was frustrated because he felt like he had no control over his future. I was curious, so after he finished his conversation, I went up to him and asked if he was okay. Tom looked a bit surprised, but then we started talking about his job and what he really wanted to do in life. To my surprise, Tom opened up about something he had been secretly interested in for years: photography. He loved taking pictures in his free time, especially of nature and city landscapes. His friends had always told him his photos were great, but he never thought about taking it further. He never believed it could be more than just a hobby. First, he seemed embarrassed to talk about it. "I don't know, Natasha," he said. "It's just a fun thing I do on the weekends. I don't think I could ever make it into a career. Plus, I'm already in a stable job. Changing careers feels risky." I could see the hesitation in his voice, and I knew that feeling well. I'd been there myself, facing that inner conflict of wanting to follow a passion but also feeling like I had too much to lose. I told him, "You know, Tom, it's never too late to follow something you love. You don't have to make a drastic change all at once. Start small and see where it takes you. If photography really excites you, then you should explore it. Sometimes the smallest step can lead to the biggest change." Tom didn't seem entirely convinced, but he promised me that he would think about it. A few weeks went by, and I didn't hear much from him. He still came to the cafe, still worked his regular job, and still looked tired. But then one day, I noticed something different. When he sat down at the cafe, he had a camera with him. I was curious, so I asked, "What's with the camera, Tom? Are you on a photo shoot or something?" He grinned and replied, "Actually, I've been taking a photography class. I decided to give it a try. It's not a big thing yet, but it's something I've always wanted to do." I could see the excitement in his eyes. It was the first time in months that I had seen him so happy about something. Tom started taking his camera with him everywhere, snapping photos during his lunch breaks and weekends. He practiced editing, then experimenting with different techniques, and even began a small photography blog where he posted his work. At first, it was a side project, something he did in his free time. But over time, he became more serious about it. He started getting requests for photo shoots from friends, family, and even some local businesses. He couldn't believe how quickly things were moving. One day, he received a message from a local magazine that wanted to feature one of his photos in an article about urban landscapes. That was the turning point for Tom. He realized that what had started as a hobby was now gaining attention from people outside of his immediate circle. Months later, Tom made a decision that would completely change his life. He decided to quit his corporate job and become a full-time photographer. I still remember when he told me the news. He said, "Natasha, I can't believe I'm actually doing this. I never imagined my hobby could become my career. It's scary, but I feel alive. Again, I feel like I'm fine." Tom's story is a perfect example of how we can often hold ourselves back from following our dreams. At first, he was afraid to make the leap. He was comfortable in his stable job, and the idea of switching careers seemed risky. But when he took that small step to start learning photography, it led him down a completely new path. Today, Tom is a successful photographer, and his work is featured in magazines, galleries, and exhibitions around the world. What I learned from Tom's story is that we often get so caught up in the idea of what's practical or safe that we forget about the things that truly excite us. We tend to overthink and worry about the future, but we forget that the first step is always the hardest. It's easy to think we don't have enough time, or we're too old, or it's too risky. But sometimes all it takes is one small decision to change everything. I want to ask you, what's something you've always wanted to try but you've been too afraid to start? Maybe it's a new hobby, a different career path, or something else that excites you. What's stopping you from taking that first step? When we allow ourselves to dream and pursue what excites us, it can completely transform our lives. It doesn't matter how big or small the dream is. What matters is that we take action. And you don't have to take a huge leap right away. Just starting with small, consistent steps can lead you to places you never imagined. Tom's journey is proof that if you follow what you love, no matter how small the step, it can eventually turn into something much bigger. If he had never picked up that camera or started that class, he never would have discovered the potential for a completely new career. So think about it. What's one thing you can start doing today that will bring you closer to your own dream? Maybe it's just setting aside an hour a week to practice something new, or reaching out to someone who's doing what you want to do and asking for advice. Whatever it is, don't let fear hold you back. You have the power to create your own path, and with each step, you'll move closer to the life you've always wanted. Now, I want to share another story with you. This one is about Maria, a woman who discovered the power of patience, learning, and never giving up, even when life didn't go as planned. Her story is an important reminder that even when things seem difficult, we can always find a way to move forward. Maria grew up in a small town with big dreams. From a young age, she loved books and wanted to be a teacher. She imagined herself in front of a classroom, helping students learn and grow. But life had other plans. When she finished high school, her family couldn't afford to send her to college. Instead of studying, Maria had to start working immediately to support her younger siblings. At first, she took a job at a local grocery store. It wasn't what she had planned, but she told herself, "This is just temporary. I'll save some money and go back to school." But as time passed, life got busier. Maria's responsibilities grew. Her siblings needed help with school fees. Her parents got older, and suddenly, years had passed. She found herself stuck in a cycle, working long hours, paying bills, and wondering if her dream of becoming a teacher was slipping away. One day, a customer came into the grocery store, struggling to count their change. It was an elderly man who seemed confused with the coins in his hand. Maria smiled and gently helped him figure it out. He thanked her, saying, "You have a lot of patience, young lady. You'd make a great teacher." Maria laughed and replied, "That was my dream, but life had other plans." The man nodded and said, "Life never takes a straight path, but that doesn't mean you should stop walking." That sentence stayed with Maria. That night, she lay in bed thinking about it. She realized that although she couldn't afford to go to college full-time, maybe there was another way. The next day, she started researching online courses. She found a program that allowed her to study at her own pace, so she signed up. At first, it was difficult. After working all day, she had to come home, cook dinner, and then sit down to study late at night. Sometimes she felt exhausted. Sometimes she wanted to quit. But every time she felt like giving up, she remembered the old man's words. Life never takes a straight path, but that doesn't mean you should stop walking. Slowly, Maria started making progress. She passed her first course, then another, then another. After 2 years of studying in the evenings and on weekends, she finally earned her teaching certificate. The day she received her certificate in the mail, she cried. It had taken years of hard work, but she had done it. She immediately applied for jobs at local schools. The first few schools rejected her. The competition was tough, but she didn't give up. She kept applying, kept learning, and kept believing in herself. Finally, she got an interview at a small primary school. When she walked into the principal's office, she was nervous. The principal looked at her resume and asked, "You worked in a grocery store for years. What made you want to become a teacher now?" Maria took a deep breath and answered, "I've wanted to be a teacher my whole life. It just took me a little longer to get here." The principal smiled and said, Maria got the job. And not just any job. She was placed in a class with students who were struggling the most. The school believed that since Maria knew what it felt like to struggle and overcome challenges, she would be the perfect teacher. For them, her first day in the classroom was unforgettable. She stood in front of the students looking at their young faces and realized she had finally made it. She had taken the long road, but she was exactly where she was meant to be. Maria's story is a powerful reminder that even when life doesn't go the way we planned, we should never give up on our dreams. Sometimes we have to take a different path to get there. Sometimes we have to work harder, wait longer, and push through obstacles. But as long as we keep moving forward, we can achieve what we set out to do. I want you to think about this. What is one dream you've put on hold? Maybe you think it's too late or too difficult, or that you don't have the time. But Maria's story shows that small steps taken consistently can lead to something incredible. Take a moment right now and ask yourself, what is something you've always wanted to do but never started? What small step can you take today to move closer to that goal? Even if you don't see results right away, every effort counts. Every minute spent learning something new, every time you practice a skill, every time you push through doubt, it all adds up. Maria didn't become a teacher overnight. It took years of hard work. But she kept going, and in the end, she achieved what she had always. Now let's dive even deeper into the idea of persistence and learning. I want to share another real-life story with you, this time about a man named Daniel. His journey is a powerful example of how determination and smart learning strategies can help you master a skill, even when you start from zero. Daniel was born and raised in a small town where English wasn't commonly spoken. Growing up, he always admired people who could speak multiple languages, especially English. He dreamed of traveling, working in an international company, and being able to communicate with people from different countries. But there was a big problem. He was terrible at learning languages. In school, English was his worst subject. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember vocabulary, and grammar felt like an impossible puzzle. He felt embarrassed when he had to read out loud in class. His classmates would laugh when he mispronounced words, and his teacher often got frustrated with him. Eventually, Daniel started believing that he just wasn't good at languages. After finishing school, he didn't think about English for years. He got a job as a mechanic, fixing cars in his town. He was happy with his work, but deep down, he still had the dream of learning English. He wanted to watch movies without subtitles, travel without fear, and have conversations with people from different countries. But every time he thought about trying again, he remembered how hard it was in school, and he told himself, "I'm just not good at this." Then something unexpected happened. One day, a tourist's car broke down near his shop. The man was from Canada and didn't speak Daniel's native language. He walked into the shop, trying to explain the problem using hand gestures and a few English words. Daniel felt nervous. He wanted to help, but he could only understand a little bit of what the man was saying. He struggled to find the right words to respond. It was frustrating. He wanted to say more, but his English wasn't good enough. That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. He realized something important. His English wasn't bad because he was not good at languages. It was bad because he had never learned the right way. He had always memorized words from textbooks, but he had never practiced speaking, listening, or using English in real life. So, Daniel made a decision. He was going to learn English again, but this time he would do it differently. He wouldn't just study grammar rules and memorize vocabulary. He would focus on real-life English, the way people actually speak. He started with listening. Every morning while working in his shop, he played English podcasts in the background. At first, he didn't understand much. The words felt too fast, and he missed a lot of information, but he kept listening. Every day, he picked up a few new words. He didn't stress about understanding everything. He just let his ears get used to the sounds of English. Then he moved on to speaking. But instead of trying to memorize difficult phrases, he started small. He practiced introducing himself. "Hi, my name is Daniel. I am a mechanic. I fix cars." He practiced this sentence over and over until it felt natural. Then, he added more. "I live in a small town. I have been working as a mechanic for 5 years." Every day, he added a little more. He talked to himself while fixing cars, pretending. He was explaining his work to an English-speaking customer. He didn't worry about making mistakes. He just focused on getting comfortable with speaking. After a few months, something incredible happened. Another tourist came into his shop, this time an American couple. They needed help with their car, and Daniel was able to have a simple conversation with them. He understood their problem, explained what needed to be fixed, and even made small talk. The couple was impressed and said, "Your English is really good." Daniel couldn't believe it. Just 6 months ago, he had been afraid to speak even a single sentence. Now he was having conversations with real people, but he didn't stop there. He wanted to get even better. So he found a language exchange partner online, someone who was learning his native language and wanted to practice English with him. They met on video calls twice a week. The first few conversations were awkward. He made a lot of mistakes, and sometimes he didn't know how to continue a sentence. But in 1 year after he started, Daniel's life had completely changed. He could understand movies without subtitles. He could listen to English songs and catch most of the words. He could confidently have conversations with tourists, and he even started helping his younger cousin learn English too. Daniel's story is proof that no one is bad at languages. The problem is not ability. It's the method. If you try to learn English by memorizing long lists of words and studying grammar rules without practicing real communication, you will struggle. But if you focus on listening, speaking, and using English in real life, you will improve much faster. So, I want to ask you, how are you learning English right now? Are you focusing too much on textbooks and not enough on real conversations? Are you listening to English every day, even if you don't understand everything? I encourage you to think about your learning methods. If you feel stuck, maybe it's time to try something new. Listen to English daily, even if it's just 10 minutes. Speak out loud, even if you are alone. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Remember, mistakes are not failures. They are signs of progress. If Daniel could go from struggling in school to confidently speaking English in just 1 year, you can too. The key is consistency. A little practice every day adds up over time. Keep going, and soon you will see results. Now let's dive even deeper into the idea of pushing yourself and making progress, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. I want to share another personal story, this time about my experience learning a new skill. It's an experience I think you can relate to as you work on your English skills. This is a story about how I learned to play the guitar. At first, I was completely clueless. I didn't know which string to press or how to hold the pick. I just knew I wanted to learn because I loved the idea of being able to play music. But the first time I picked up the guitar, my fingers felt stiff, and nothing sounded right. It was so frustrating. Every time I strummed the strings, the sound was either too sharp or too flat, and I felt like I was failing. There were moments when I thought, maybe I should just stop. This is too hard. I'll never get it. But then I remembered something important. Learning something new always takes time. It's not about being perfect right away. It's about improving slowly, step by step. I realized that if I wanted to get better, I couldn't give up. So I made a commitment to practice every day, even if it was just for 10 minutes. In the beginning, those 10 minutes felt long. My fingers would hurt, and the songs I wanted to play sounded terrible, but I kept going. I didn't focus on how bad I sounded. Instead, I celebrated small wins, like getting my first chord to sound clear, or playing my first simple melody without any mistakes. As time went on, I noticed that my hands started moving more naturally. The pain in my fingers faded and my confidence grew. After a few months, I could play simple songs without thinking too much about it. It was still far from perfect, but I was improving, and that was enough. Then one day I was sitting with my friends, and one of them handed me a guitar. They asked me to play something, and for the first time, I felt comfortable doing it in front of others. I played a song I had been practicing for a while, and to my surprise, everyone enjoyed it. They said I sounded great, and I was proud of myself. This experience taught me something important. Improvement doesn't happen overnight, but with persistence, you can achieve things you never thought possible. This story is a great reminder for anyone learning English. At first, it can be hard. You might make mistakes, and you may even feel like you're not improving. But just like with the guitar, your progress will come. The key is to stay consistent and celebrate the small victories along the way. If you can speak one sentence without hesitation, that's a victory. If you understand a new phrase in a conversation, that's progress. Another great example comes from my friend Sarah, who learned to speak English fluently in just a few years. When she first started, she could barely form a sentence. She was embarrassed and frustrated, but she decided to take a different approach. Instead of focusing only on grammar rules or vocabulary, she started using English in real-life situations. Sarah joined an international community of language learners, and every day she would engage in conversations with people from all over the world. Sometimes the conversations were awkward, and she would make mistakes. But rather than feeling discouraged, she used those mistakes as learning opportunities. There was one time when she had a conversation with a native speaker, and she said something completely wrong. She wanted to say, "I enjoy reading books," but instead she said, "I enjoy book read." It was a silly mistake, and she could feel her face turning red. But instead of being embarrassed, she laughed at herself. The person she was talking to didn't even notice the mistake. They just continued the conversation. Later, when Sarah reflected on the situation, she realized that no one was judging her. The most important thing was that she had communicated her idea. She didn't let one mistake stop her from speaking again. In fact, that moment made her more confident to continue practicing, and over time her English improved. She started speaking more fluently, and before she knew it, she was having full conversations with native speakers. I made mistakes. I used the wrong word a couple of times, but no one cared. They were just happy that I was trying to communicate. In fact, one of the people I met complimented me on my effort and said, "Your English is great, and I really appreciate how you're making an effort to speak with me." That moment meant so much to me. It reminded me that language learning is a journey, and every step counts. No one is perfect, and the most important thing is to keep improving. Just like I was able to improve my English by speaking to people, at the conference, you can also improve by using English in your daily life. Now let's take a quick look at how you can make this journey easier. It's all about setting small, achievable goals. Don't focus on becoming fluent overnight. Set realistic goals, like having a short conversation with a friend in English, listening to an English podcast for 10 minutes a day, or writing a few sentences in English every evening. When you set small goals, you'll feel a sense of achievement with each one, and that will keep you motivated. If you're ever feeling stuck, just remember that progress doesn't happen instantly. It's okay to take your time. The important thing is that you keep going, even if it feels difficult. If you make learning English a regular part of your routine, you'll soon see improvements that will amaze you. And remember, every step you take brings you closer to your goal. So, let's continue to move forward together. Stay motivated, keep practicing, and most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Keep learning and improving, and before you know it, your English skills will reach new heights. Now, let's think about how we can make this kind of practice a regular part of our lives. It's easy to say, I'll speak more in English. But what does that actually look like? Here are some simple, practical ways you can start using English every day. Speak with yourself in English. Yes, this might sound a little strange at first, but it works. Try talking to yourself in English about your day, what you're doing, or what you plan to do. It doesn't matter if it's just a few sentences. The more you get used to speaking, the easier it will be when you talk to others. Find a conversation partner. If you don't have anyone around you who speaks English, look online for language exchange partners. You can find people who want to learn your native language, and you can practice speaking English with them. This is a great way to get comfortable speaking without feeling pressured. Join a language learning group. Many cities have groups that meet to practice languages. If you can't find one in person, there are many online groups. These groups are usually very supportive and welcoming, and they offer a great opportunity to practice speaking in a low-pressure environment. Use language apps. There are many apps that connect you with people to practice speaking. For example, apps like HelloTalk or Tandem allow you to speak with native speakers and other learners. It's a fun way to practice and learn at the same time. Watch TV shows or movies in English. Pay attention to how people speak. Try to repeat sentences out loud or imitate the way they speak. This helps you get used to the rhythm and pronunciation of the language. You can start with subtitles in your native language, and then switch to English subtitles as you improve. Take notes in English. When you're writing in English, even if it's just a shopping list or notes for work or school, try to write in English as much as possible. This helps improve both your writing and your vocabulary. Let's talk about one more example of using real-life practice to improve English. I recently had the chance to work with an international team on a project. This was a big challenge for me because even though I could speak English, I wasn't used to talking about business topics in English. The first few meetings were awkward, and I was worried that I wouldn't understand everything or that I would say something wrong. But as the project went on, I started feeling more comfortable. I asked questions when I didn't understand something, and I made sure to clarify anything that was confusing. The other team members were very supportive, and they didn't mind when I made mistakes. Slowly, I started understanding the business terminology and speaking more confidently during the meetings. One thing I learned from this experience is how important it is to adapt to different contexts. In this case, business English was new for me, so I had to learn the vocabulary and expressions specific to that context. Just like you might need to learn how to talk about cooking or traveling in English, you will need to adjust your language. Depending on the situation, it's easy to focus on general English skills like grammar and vocabulary, but don't forget that there are many different types of English for different situations. The more you expose yourself to various contexts, the more fluent and comfortable you'll become. Another thing I want to mention is the importance of feedback. Sometimes we don't realize that we're making mistakes until someone else points them out. When I was first starting to speak English more frequently, I was afraid of getting feedback because I didn't want to make mistakes. But the more feedback I got, the faster I improved. People were able to correct my pronunciation, point out grammar errors, and give me advice on how to sound more natural. Now that we've talked about the importance of making mistakes and pushing through difficult moments, let's explore another key aspect of language learning: confidence. One of the biggest challenges that learners face, including myself, is feeling confident enough to speak, especially in real-life situations. We can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we're too afraid to use it, it doesn't do us much good. I remember the first time I had to speak in front of a group of people in English. It was at a work presentation. I had prepared everything, memorized my key points, organized my slides, but as soon as I stood in front of the audience, my mind went blank. My palms got sweaty and I could feel my heart racing. It was a real test of my confidence. At that moment, I remembered something I had learned earlier. Confidence is built through action. It doesn't come from just knowing the language, but from using it over and over again, even when it feels uncomfortable. So I took a deep breath and started speaking. I didn't focus on the fear. Instead, I focused on the message I wanted to share. I didn't let small mistakes stop me. In fact, I didn't let anything stop me. And guess what? The audience responded positively. They appreciated the content and they weren't focused on my mistakes. They cared more about the message I was delivering. By the end of the presentation, I felt a huge sense of accomplishment, and more importantly, my confidence had grown significantly. That experience taught me a valuable lesson. Confidence comes from doing, not just from knowing. The more you practice, the more confident you will become. Now let's think about how you can apply this to your English learning journey. For many learners, the fear of speaking in front of others can be paralyzing. But what if you changed your she mindset? Instead of worrying about mistakes, think of each conversation as an opportunity to grow. Even if you're speaking with someone who is also learning English, it's a chance to practice, improve, and build confidence. Let me give you another example. This time, it's about how I overcame my fear of making phone calls in English. I used to avoid calling anyone in English, whether it was to book a reservation or ask for information. I would feel nervous and anxious, thinking about the possibility of making a mistake. But I knew that avoiding these situations wasn't going to help me improve. So one day I decided to make a call. It wasn't a big deal. I was calling a customer service number to ask about an order, but it was a big step for me. I dialed the number, and when the person on the other end picked up, I felt my heart race. I took a deep breath and introduced myself in English. The person on the other end replied, and I started the conversation. Even though I made a mistake with one of the phrases, it didn't matter. The person was polite and patient, and we were able to finish the call without any problems. That call was a turning point for me. It showed me that making phone calls in English wasn't as scary as I had imagined. In fact, after that, I made more calls, both small ones and bigger ones. Each time, I felt more comfortable, and each time, my English improved. This is a perfect example of why real-life practice is so important in language learning. When we practice in real situations, we learn to manage the pressure of speaking, which helps us get better faster. It's not about having perfect grammar or pronunciation. It's about being able to communicate effectively, no matter how many mistakes. At first, I took it personally and felt embarrassed, but over time, I realized that feedback was a gift. It helped me become a better speaker, and it made me more aware of the areas where I needed to improve. Don't be afraid of feedback. It's an essential part of the learning process. So, what do you think? Are you ready to take your English to the next level? The road may not always be easy, but remember that every step you take brings you closer to your goal. Whether you're speaking, listening, reading, or writing, there are always opportunities to improve. As we continue, let's take a moment to reflect on all the progress you've made so far. It's easy to forget how much you've learned, especially when you're focused on your next goal. But if you look back, I'm sure you'll realize how far you've come. And that's something worth celebrating. So far, we've covered a lot of the personal side of learning English, like overcoming fear and building confidence. But now I want to dive deeper into a specific area that many learners struggle with: consistency. This is a topic that has been key to my language learning success. Without consistency, progress can be slow, and it can be easy to lose motivation. But when we make small efforts each day, Even if they're just a few minutes, the results are powerful. I remember when I first started seriously learning English. At the beginning, I would study hard for a few days, then take a break for a week, and then start again. I thought this would work because I was studying intensely when I did study. But after a few months, I realized that I wasn't improving as much as I wanted to. It was frustrating because I felt like I was working so hard but not seeing the results I expected. Then I came across a very simple but life-changing concept. Small daily habits lead to big results. Instead of studying hard for hours on end, I started dedicating just 15 to 20 minutes every day to learning English. At first, it didn't seem like a lot of time, but slowly I noticed how much progress I was making. The key wasn't in the length of time spent studying, but in doing it regularly. One thing I started doing was setting a small, achievable goal each day. For example, I'd aim to learn 5 new words every day. Sometimes it was just reviewing vocabulary or practicing sentences I had already learned. Over time, these small tasks added up, and I saw improvement in my vocabulary and fluency. The best part was that it didn't feel like work. It became part of my routine. Now, whenever I meet someone learning a new language, I encourage them to build small, consistent habits into their day. It's far more effective than cramming for hours once a week. And even on days when you don't feel like studying, just doing a little bit can make a big difference in the long run. For example, think about a simple habit you could introduce into your routine. Maybe you can start by listening to an English podcast while you're getting ready in the morning or taking a walk. You don't have to sit down and study for hours. Just listening to a podcast or watching a short video in English will help your listening skills over time. Even if you don't understand every word, you're training your ear to recognize the sounds and rhythms of the language. Speaking of listening, one of the best ways to improve your English is by listening to content that is relevant to you. I love listening to podcasts about topics that interest me because I'm more likely to stay engaged. For example, I listen to podcasts about personal development, technology, and even cooking. These are topics I enjoy, so I'm more likely to keep listening and pick up new vocabulary in the process. Listening to real-world content, like interviews, stories, or discussions, can really help you get used to the way native speakers use the language. They speak quickly, use slang, and sometimes don't follow perfect grammar rules, but they communicate effectively. And that's the goal, right? To communicate. The more you expose yourself to natural conversations, the more you'll get used to the flow of language, which will help you improve your own speaking and listening skills. Another powerful tool for improving listening is to repeat what you hear. This is something that helped me a lot. After I listen to a podcast or watch a video in English, I go back and repeat some of the sentences or phrases I heard. This helps me improve my pronunciation, and it helps me remember useful phrases I can use in my own conversations. Sometimes I even record myself and listen back to check how close I am to the original pronunciation. At first, it feels a little awkward, but over time, it becomes more natural. Here's an example from my own learning. I had a difficult time understanding fast-paced conversations in English, especially when people spoke with different accents. But I didn't give up. I started listening to podcasts and TV shows with different accents: American, British, Australian, and even Irish. At first, it was challenging to understand everything. But the more I listened, the better I became at picking up on different sounds and phrases. Slowly, I could understand more, even when the conversation was fast or the accent was strong. This taught me the value of exposing yourself to a variety of accents and speaking styles. It also helped me feel more confident in real-life conversations.